Hello and welcome to At the 55, your home for OUA, U Sport, maybe just Canadian football at this point with the conversation we're having today because me and Tom are back on the mics doing a little bit of a high school football season check-in. We're time of recording December 18th, so all football in Canada is long done. Conversations about the upcoming OSFL season are obviously happening for a lot of clubs. Football Ontario, and no doubt the other provincial programs are piecing together their plan for next coming season. But we're in the heart of winter here talking the high school football. We'll get to all that and much more. But first, Tom, how the heck you doing, my friend?
Oh, I'm doing so well. Anytime we get back in the pod and back on the mics with just you and me, it always brings a smile to my face. And I've been itching. There's no more Canadian football, and I've been itching to just talk about something here. So I'm so happy that we get a chance to do this.
It's been a thing that a lot of folks who've reached out to us and following up the Arnaud Desjardins pod.
Mhm.
Again, big shout out to him for joining us. And big shout out to a lot of the folks from the Quebec region for giving us
Yes.
the thumbs up for that. Really appreciate it. So happy to be your voice to keep you abreast to all things going on in OUA football. So merci beaucoup à vous. But a lot of people have been talking about, if it's not expanding to other conferences in U Sports, getting a little high school football content going. And Tom, you and I have had the pleasure, the privilege of going to a couple showcases of late and getting to see some of the young talent of today and tomorrow from the U Sports perspective. And that's really what we want to talk to off the jump before we get into those experiences. Just thought it would only be appropriate. We're only about, time recording less than a month away from the OFSA Bowls that we had here. Not that Tom and I had the ability to be live and direct from Windsor, but nonetheless, just a chance to shout out those programs that are at the pinnacle of Ontario football at the high school level. So allow me to just do that super quickly. In the Eastern Bowl, it was Holy Cross CSS victorious over Northern Secondary, Toronto's finest there. Final score 23-4 in the Eastern Bowl. In the Central Bowl, it was St. Joseph's High School falling to St. Roch CS 28-13. In the National Capital Bowl, it was Huron Heights victorious over Cora 35-15. In the Western Bowl, it was Catholic Central High School 30, WF Herman 7. Shout out to Coach Karowski out there with the Catholic Central Crusaders. In the Northern Bowl, it was Frontenac SS 25 over Westgate Secondary School 14. In the Golden Horseshoe Bowl, it was Corpus Christi victorious over A.N. Myers 13-10. In the Independent Bowl, it was Brebeuf College falling to Northern CI and VS 28-7. In the Simcoe Bowl, it was Paul Dwyer victorious over Barrie North Central, CI 9-7. And in the Southern Bowl, it was the Centennial CVI 35 Westmount SS 7. Shout out to some Guelph football there for Centennial. Those are the bowl games, Tom. Obviously, we didn't have the privy of being at any of those games, though no doubt, and I can certainly speak from the experiences I'll get into. We've now gotten to see some of the players that make these programs so great. Tom, you were at the showcase out in Oshawa. I'll leave it to you to introduce what that was all about and talk about those experiences.
Yeah. I had an awesome opportunity to go out to the Gridiron Showcase that was put on by a couple of individuals who are former U Sports players. I believe actually they both played at Concordia, and was really, how do I put this nicely? Anytime you go to a showcase like that's put on by individuals of any kind of way that you don't have a whole ton of history behind, there's a lot of like, how well will everything go here? Like, are we really going to see the best quality? Is it going to be organized properly? Whatever. But I want to give a special shout out, Bryce Crawford and Chris Robertson. These two guys are former Oshawa Hawkeyes themselves. They are from the Oshawa region and are now strength and conditioning coaches out in the U Sports world. And they did a fantastic job of really making sure that this was a quality showcase and it was quality run from top to bottom. Going into this, they had, I believe they said about 110 kids from a top to bottom, which is a really solid number. And they actually capped it at that because they didn't want to overwhelm the positional coaches there by having like 20 or 30 running backs, for example, or something along those lines. So they did a great job in that aspect. They had a bunch of kids from all across Ontario. A couple of kids from Sault Ste. Marie actually couldn't make the drive because they got snowed in, but they were supposed to come on down. It was a great opportunity there for sure. And every position coach was from the U Sports level to really drive home that professional aspect of things. They started off with a full combine set. So guys are doing 40-yard dash, vert jumps, broad jumps, everything. The only thing they didn't do was bench, but they did everything else, and they were able to post those numbers for all of the kids, which was awesome. And then afterwards, every position was able to do one-on-ones, which was such an awesome experience to really be a part of, to see these high school kids to and really get quality coaching and be able to showcase their stuff against, other top talent was fantastic, obviously. A few names in particular really stood out from the page for me. I've got my special notepad here because they were really doing their thing. From the defensive back side of things, Jalen Adams out of St. Joseph Scarlett Hall, I thought was a real blanket on some of those wide receivers and running backs that were coming out of the backfield. Williams Igbeni from Rebuff College, a defensive lineman who was an absolute load in the middle. He is 100% going to be a one tech at the next level. I really liked his speed, his agility, and the strength and athleticism that he had. And there was two brothers from on the defensive line, Stephen Buckeridge and Matthew Buckeridge, both from Huron Heights. They showed some real outstanding potential. Matthew Buckeridge, in particular, if I'm remembering correctly, he's probably, I want to say 6'4", 6'5", somewhere in that range, and he's got a wide frame, but he's only, I believe, a grade 11. So he's got a lot of potential to pack on some weight and really do his thing. And obviously he's a young kid, so that kind of showed while he was out there. But man, he was making some guys move, and he was doing some real special things, which I thought was awesome. From the offensive line side of things,
Let's
because we
go.
got to talk about our O linemen. Two guys really stood out to me. Cole Perry out of Centennial Secondary really showcased solid footwork. When I had my opportunity to coach at the University of Guelph in 2019, obviously soaking in as much knowledge as I possibly can from Mike McDonald, one of the best O-line coaches out there. His big thing was, when I look for an offensive lineman, I need to see flexibility. I need to see bend. I want to see how you bend your ankle, your knee, and your hips. If you've got good solid bend and you can move, I don't really care about any other intangibles. Obviously, within a certain, you need to be a certain height, whatever. But he's like, as long as you have that, you've got potential here. You can play for me. And I saw that out of Cole Perry. I thought he did great. The guy that I was probably the most impressed with was Owen Prack, another offensive lineman out of St. John Henry Newman, out of Hamilton here, which was an awesome little thing to see. But he played tackle a whole bunch. He is 100% a guard at the next level, moving bodies, looked like a nasty dude, open to coaching. Really, really impressed with him. Really, really liked him. Just a few more names, and I want to make sure that I'm calling out all of these young men. Probably one of the most impressive players of the entire camp, Jace Baldwin, running back out of Georgetown High School, had some of the best hands at the camp. His vision was insane, and his ability to start and stop on a dime was unbelievable. Loved everything from that I saw from that young man. He was a huge reason why Georgetown this year was able to upset the Nelson Lords, who are typically, one of the best schools coming out of Burlington, and typically fight for, higher and higher aspects. A couple of other names as well. Elijah Felix out of Brooklyn High School, Cameron Mitchell out of All Saints Catholic Secondary School, both of them also running backs. Those are the guys that really stood out to me, showcasing outstanding ability and outstanding showmanship, really, by not just going up and catching the ball and really doing the run reads, but having the opportunity to do some one-on-ones in the pass game, which you never get to see that, but running backs doing pass game blocking in there, which was fantastic. And then even ending off in a full on inside run period with a full O line, D line, linebackers, and running backs in the back end. It was an awesome setting to really be a part of. Obviously, they were doing a little bit of Skelly down on the other end, but I don't really care about that. I want to see the big boys. I want to see them rumble. But it was a really well done showcase. I hired a whole lot of the other coaches that were there, really talk about how much they enjoyed the product, how well it was run, and even the facilities at Oshawa. So once again, Bryce Crawford and Chris Robertson, shout out to those two gentlemen because they are outstanding individuals and they care about the game, which is why I wanted to go.
Yeah, when you told me that this event was going to have a full inside run period, it was the week after the Vanier, and I was very much looking forward to a weekend and not traveling. That alone probably was the closest to getting me on the road out of all the things you'd mentioned. I love that you had the names of the guys listed because unfortunately, when I'm going over the Coach Ross big man camp that I was at, clinic, I should say, I have a lot of the clubs that they were repping, but don't necessarily have the names there. I do think you mentioned Mr. Benny from Bebuff. I'm pretty sure he was at that camp as well. And you mentioned the Huron Heights guys. And I guess I'll bring up this comment now because I was going to talk about it with Coach Ross's big man camp. I get it. I get it with Huron Heights. Holy cow. At all levels, they had guys at the camp I was at, and not to jump off of what you were talking about just yet, but man, oh man, it was just the level of lineman play that they were sending out. It's second to none, and just envisioning like having that type of talent at darn near every level is spectacular to be able to have. And it's such a, these guys who get to then play for so many years and build that culture. Yeah, Tom, what any other things from the clinic that you just want to highlight at all?
Yeah, I mean, I really had an awesome opportunity to chat with a lot of the U Sports coaches who were there.
Yeah, who was there?
Some guys in particular that I wanted to comment on. There's three gentlemen from Queens who were there.
We
who
love
fantastic. We love Queens. Reed Anderson, defensive line coach. Excuse me, it was no, I believe it was James Young. My apologies.
Again, we love Queens.
We love Queens. We love Queens. Cam Davidson, H-backs coach, and Travis DeZant, receivers coach. I had a chance to talk to all three of those guys. They were outstanding. Travis gave us a little bit of shit because apparently we talk shit about his receivers a little bit too much. But hey, we call it like we see it. And I actually said, I think those receivers are pretty damn good. I just want to put that out on the record. But
I think I said there wasn't a sexy group of names. That's all I ever said. Is that the worst crime against humanity? Maybe. I don't know.
But Travis in particular said something, and the other two backed him up, which blew my mind. When you look at Queens, a historic program dating all the way back to some of the earliest football that was played in North America in general. This 5-year stint that Queens has been on, with going to a couple of Yates Cups, making it into the playoffs, whether it's semifinals or whatever the case, is one of, if not the most, hang on, I've got the exact wording here, and I really want to make sure I get this right. This is the most successful 5-year stint in Queens football history. They've had times where they've gone to Yates Cups, and obviously they've won Yates Cups and won Vaniers like in 2009. But typically, directly afterwards, there's been a major drop off. You think about that 2009 Vanier Cup team that the Yates Cup is my absolute favorite game to ever watch. But directly afterwards, 2010, 2011, you saw a pretty massive dip in that because of all of the seniors that are a part of that outstanding program. Not to say that Queens is bad by any means, but they're not necessarily getting back to that kind of momentum with that standpoint. So to have a 5-year stint that's either the most successful or at least one of the most successful stints in all of Queens football history within these last 5 years blew my mind. And I wanted to make sure that I saved that little nugget until I shared that with you here.
That's amazing. Just big shout out to Coach Schneider. That is awesome. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Tom, I think it's the following weekend that I was spending time checking out some local talent here. And when I say local talent, I refer almost entirely to the fact that it was a local event to me, because much like the event you were at, the talent spanned from darn near all over. And it was, of course, Coach Ross Asaro's big man clinic that he hosts up at Downsview here in Toronto. And it was a 3 day event, and I got to go out for the Saturday and Sunday of it. And I'd say number one thing, first thing that was one of the best moments for me was going out there and I see Coach Asaro. He's out there, he's doing his thing. The session had already begun, and I see a dude out there with a Coach Malcolm shirt on. I'm looking at him, and the unfortunate thing with our sport of football is sometimes you don't become as familiar with the faces themselves. But knowing Coach Asaro's connection as a coach with U of T, I'm looking at him thinking, okay, Malcolm Campbell, Big Man Clinic. And lo and behold, as I go to introduce myself, it certainly is Malcolm Campbell, one of the fiercest defensive ends of his generation, of that sort of late 2010s era U of T football. So that was awesome to be able to get to see. But again, what was most impressive, and though I don't have the names written down, you saw a lot of the Toronto-based players there, a lot of junior Argos, a lot of Scarborough Thunder, Vaughan Rebels, but a ton of guys wearing Guelph junior Griffin gear, seeing guys out of London, seeing guys, as I was mentioning, a lot of the Huron Heights guys, Holy Trinity Titans, I believe out of the Oakville area, I think,
Mm-hmm.
Brantford, Bill Crothers, yeah, Durham Dolphins, uh, yeah, and Cora, again, coming all the way from north of the wall, coming all the way down here, which, number one, a huge shout out to Coach Asaro in people
Mm-hmm.
recognizing that this is the place to be. As far as I know, there isn't a big man O-line D-line clinic of the, well, let alone of the caliber of the one he runs, let alone really of any comparison that just focuses on the line anywhere in the province. So huge shout out to him. And then on top of it, just the clout of people starting to recognize that this is where you need to go to get better, to get recognized by other coaches. There were plenty of scouts there. Coach DA, Darrell Adams from U of T was there and talking with the guys. A lot of the scouts. Guelph was represented there. Mac had scouts there. York had scouts there. And of course, all the while, Coach Asaro there doing his thing for U of T as well. So just from that standpoint, it was awesome. The coaching was phenomenal, second to none. It was broken up into a U14, U16, U18 bracket throughout the 5 hour period each day. And you could tell that he obviously had it curated based on the age, the skill level, and the concepts they could grasp. It was just, both as a coach and a teacher, I was so enamored with the kind of breakdown of concept and build up to what they work towards later on in the sessions. For the big dogs, U16 and U18, it capped off with with crossover one-on-one periods and even some half line inside run looks to begin with as well. And so it was an awesome 2 days I got to see there. Another just shout out to Coach Ross that he hooked Tom and myself up with some custom t-shirts from the event, which I've not been able to get Tom his yet because we live in separate cities and I haven't made the drive yet. So again, big shout out to that. And yeah, again, though I didn't catch the names of these guys, number one, yeah, the Huron Heights guys were just phenomenal. And you could see both the frame, the size, all the things that you were mentioning, but just the technique was so solid. And across the board, and perhaps you saw this yourself, what I'm most impressed with some of the linemen we had out there is that for sure big bodies, but particularly on the offensive line side, there were such tremendous looking athletes.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, as you highlighted in talking about some of the guys there, it's that frame. But guys where you might look at it and say, you know what? Your football coach was probably in a fist fight with the basketball coach to say, are you going to slim down and become my star center? Or am I going to bulk you up and turn you into an absolute beast on the offensive line? The athleticism was just so outstanding. And you obviously highlighted the quality of the U Sport coaches who were at the clinic out in Oshawa. Again, these programs are some of these programs were we're seeing here all those programs represented at those OFSA Bowl games, the blue blood programs of all these different regions. Football is getting so good at this level. at OSFL and high school regions, because again, you can just see the technique is so sound, and obviously being at a camp like that, getting coached by one of the best, and Coach Asaro is going to help clean up those things to make it that much better. But just seeing from just the literal look of these athletes to their technique, it is so it's everything is it's not sloppy. It's they know what they're doing, and there's certainly a little bit of a selection bias, because the types of kids who are going to go to those camps are often kids who are already the best of the best. So yeah, I'm certain that that's not how all these programs look across the board on their lines, but just the caliber of athletes and getting to see the technique, recognizing that they're clearly getting good coaching. Then fast forward that to OUA standpoint has me very, very excited for the state of football in our province here. Tom, you also got to spend some time recently at the Steel City Bowl now as
Mhm.
well.
Yeah. For those of you who don't know, Hamilton always has a all-star showcase between the Hamilton Catholic and the Hamilton Public boards that they call the Steel City Bowl. It's been happening for a number of years, and it always happens, at least as far as back as I can remember, at McMaster. I think it might have been at Ivor Wynn back in the day, but at McMaster in particular. And so I had a chance to get to go out there and be on the sidelines and just kind of watch the game kind of unfold here. And once again, I know I'm biased. Hamilton football is pretty damn good. You saw some athletes out there. You saw some dudes who can really do some special things. It's a little bit tough, obviously, because they only have about a week worth of practicing to try to get as accustomed to certain guys, whether it's a new quarterback who's in, whether it's, a new running system or defensive scheme, whatever the case may be. But the athletes that were there were outstanding in every regard. But in that, I wanted to kind of build that into another conversation that I wanted to have with you, my friend, in that we've had this kind of conversation, I think, a couple of times here, in just, is there such a thing as too much football?
Mm.
When you and I were kind of talking briefly about the idea of previously, especially if guys need a little bit more time with actual live bullets rather than, spending time in the weight room or whatever the case, you could have guys who are going into summer league football, and then immediately afterwards you get like maybe a week or two, and then you go right into U Sports football, which you yourself did. And in that vein, I wanted to talk about, the All-Star showcases, in that, in your opinion, do you really see the value for these student athletes who go out there in an all-star showcase, when probably more often than not, all of the scouts who are at this all-star showcase have already seen these guys in the regular season? Or are you a fan of, no, this is another opportunity for them to really showcase their stuff, and maybe, they were on a struggling team, or they had an offense that really didn't showcase how great a receiver could do because they didn't have a quarterback, or whatever the case may be? What are your thoughts on all-star showcases in particular?
I'm probably lean more towards the latter of saying that there's certainly room for it, in particular for kids who maybe are on a program that's struggling, to be able to have that ability to work within a system where, yeah, whether it's the receiver who just couldn't get the ball because all they could do is just run just a dive play up the middle and their quarterback couldn't make a throw, and all the other possible reasons that might leave a kid wanting more. Maybe they just go to a program that doesn't get highlighted. One of the comments I was making to so many of these kids I was getting to talk to at Coach Ross's camp, because they all saw me as some kind of authority figure there. They were asking, what do I need to do to get to the next level, and this, that, and how, what kind of numbers do I need to be benching, all these things. And it's just like, look, hey, how do I get my name out there? It's like, look, there are people who get paid a salary to find you. And
Mhm.
not that you can't make yourself a little bit more known and out there, just follow the program, stay healthy. I love Coach McDonald's point he mentioned to you about stay mobile and all these types of things. I more lean towards the latter. I think in large part it would be nice to see, and obviously as we get into the new year, we'll do a bit of we'll break down with some of the Football Ontario events that are coming up next year and everything going on with that. Maybe even sooner than that. It would be neat to see again, not that everything has to be run through Football Ontario, because I think it's great to see these more independent
Mhm.
things coming about, but just with the orchestration of the nature of the football calendar. Because I think sometimes you get into sticky situations when, like, the thing I hate the most is when a kid has to make a tough choice between I'm playing OSFL football, and now all of a sudden there's a red black game that I want to go to because that's this bigger showcase than my week 2 matchup or whatever, or the preseason game that we have, or there's a clinic going on right now, and now I'm gonna have to I'm playing high school basketball, and now I'm gonna have to miss that to go to these things. I think there are perhaps ways that, and not to say don't really have a sense that it's working counter to that at the moment, but I think there's perhaps ways of just going about it a little smarter. I don't think more is necessarily better. So from that standpoint, I wouldn't always, so though I'm generally in agreement that I think it's okay to have these showcases and these all-star games. I think just knowing Football Ontario the way we know them and have all the trust and love for the way that they're running those things, just from the standpoint of, at the end of the day, as long as the best intention is in making sure that these kids are getting opportunities to do exactly what the name implies, to showcase their abilities and to do so in a way that is accessible and affordable, I think it's perfectly fine. There is and probably from spending too much time with our brother in Dakota Vine, the little cynic in me that sometimes wonders about, how much of this is can be sometimes a money grab. Like, hey, we'll get you film from this, and we'll introduce you to this person, and we can do whatever, and just be like, okay, it's about the kids now, and like again, all these people are on Instagram and they're all on social media. Like, they don't need, like, they all have their own platforms to begin with. So I think there's certainly room for it in the calendar. I think perhaps that just working smarter towards these goals and having things just within sort of, we have that name there, Football Ontario. It's there for a reason, and just making sure that it's all working, pulling towards the same ends, because that's sometimes the frustration I get in the game of football ever since I've entered the sort of coaching and media sphere that you and I operate in now, which is, you meet folks where it just, so I sometimes pause at just what is it that they're necessarily trying to get out of it. I don't know if I've met any examples, come across any examples that I can highlight, but that's always in the back of my head. Frankly, it's why on this platform we've always been hesitant in doing high school football, just because if we make comments about OUA players that impacts the way a CFL scout, or heck, even maybe an NFL scout looks at someone and that affects the draft stock. Well, I mean, come on. Like, they get paid, if there are people at U Sport programs getting paid money to find high school kids, the scouts at the CFL next level, like, do more than listen to us talk about these guys. But that's, I think, always been part of the hesitation in all the iterations of this brand is, man, for these high school kids, it's such a vulnerable time in your life, and there's so many people trying to tell you what to do and this, that, and the third, and they all want to live their dreams, and I want them for them, and just wanting to be as careful as we can be to not sway it one way or the other that would impact a kid like that. And so, like, I'm an educator at heart and in profession, and so that's just where I start with all these things. And as long as people are doing it from that perspective as well, I have no qualms with it. But yeah, as you alluded to, I went through my first 2 years at Guelph, pretty much going through a 365-year cycle of football and off seasons and OVFL into CIS football and rinse, lather, and repeat. So it can be a lot. And frankly, it led to a period in my life where I don't even know if I liked football anymore because I was overdoing it. So that's part of my 2 cents on it, as long as it's with the kids' intention in mind first and foremost.
Well, if it's always with the kids in mind, then of course everything here is perfectly fine. There's been more and more times where you can really see, or you hear horror stories about, this is what happened to me, or this is what I'm seeing, or whatever the case. And obviously you never really want that. But, you get into these scenarios, especially now that you and I are both coaching at the high school level ourselves, where I'm sure you've seen it before. I'm currently dealing with it right now, where I've got kids who are on the fence on, do I want to go to the next level right away? Do I want to come back for another year? Do I want to potentially go down to like a junior college? Do I like all of these other things? And the coach in me is saying, no, I need you back. I want to go. I want to try to win a championship. I need you back. But it's my responsibility now as a coach, as a mentor, to have the best for these kids in mind, and to really talk about, like, for you in particular, ex kid, you should go to university. I think you're ready for that. I think you're going to get more out of this. Or no, I think you should stay here. I think you need a little bit more time to really get acclimated to things, understand the system that we're trying to run here, improve your grades a little bit, whatever the case may be. So from that standpoint, especially if you have a kid with a really influential coach, you can shape a kid's life just in the couple years that you're there. You're doing it all the time as a teacher yourself. So there's a lot of opportunities there to potentially take advantage of certain kids saying, hey, I think you should come back here. You should be doing this. You hear all the time about like, well, they're teaching a certain way that will win now, but you're not really teaching fundamentals in terms of what you should be building towards. And you see that all the time in offensive line play where guys are, they got really bad stance. They're coming out with the chicken wings that haven't been done since like the 70s, but it works at the high school level. And it starts and you can get pretty far and it's just, wall this guy off or just whatever else. And away you go. And then the kid, if he's strong enough, he's big enough, if he has an opportunity, now you're outline coach at U Sports is going, what the hell are you doing? Never ever do a chicken wing ever again. And now you're back in like a year or two, or maybe even 3 before you start learning proper techniques. And then you're ready to go versus if you're being taught that right away, but that's a lot harder, especially for the kids who aren't going to go to U Sports. And so there's a lot of different factors that can kind of lead into this. But at the end of the day, like you said, if you got the kids in mind, first and foremost, I think you're doing okay.
Man, what you just said there brought up so much emotion for me as a guy who was an undersized lineman,
Yeah.
where in part I mean I had great coaches. Coach Ross Asar was an offensive line coach of mine way back when, and getting to learn under a guy like that for the now former Metro Toronto Wildcats of the now former Ontario Varsity Football League was certainly a blessing for me. And then even when I got into the University of Guelph, and to this day, I probably still have a slight bias when sometimes you just see that kid who is just the born to be a road grader for no other reason than he's 5 times bigger than the next kid. And as you said, whether it's the chicken wing elbows out to the side, or if it's just, all right, you're just going to cut block and roll through on every single block. And we run a 3-step drop, ball's going to get out. And so, hey, no sacks given up and anything like that, or just grabbing and there's no technique. Again, as someone who had proper coaching, but couldn't get away with just saying, I'm going to be bigger and stronger than you at all times. I still have that push and pull when at the high school level. It stands to reason that you keep things as simple as possible. And I struggle with that as well, because I'm an overthinker by nature, but also in recognizing that, well, here are the actual concepts and techniques that is what's going to build at the next level. And that push and pull of, I love how you said that win now, what do we need to do to be great here this season? And maybe that's where there is that room for these specialized camps and clinics versus just the high school level. And I know when we had JT Suey on the show back in the summer, I forget when it was exactly at this point, when he even talked about that common language. And again, it's not to say that every team gets a playbook from Football Ontario. It's like, here are the plays you run. But it's just having that sense of, okay, when we say a zone step, that people are teaching these methods so that you know whether you are going to high school football up in Sault Ste. Marie, in Ottawa, in London, Ontario. We have that same concept. It's the same reason we have football. Canada football has the safe contact protocol, where those are things that we're very comfortable recognizing that these are the ways that you tackle to keep things safe. I don't know if it's any different from that standpoint. Again, you and I were talking a bit before this, where, whether you want to call it a zone or a dive, oftentimes on the offensive line, the principles are going to work out to be pretty similar, or duo concepts, whatever it might be. The concepts are pretty similar. So just having that commonality in there. But yeah, that win now emphasis versus what's in the long haul is obviously a very difficult thing to be able to reconcile from that standpoint. And Tom, obviously for you being in a hotbed like Hamilton, I can only imagine it for someone like yourself, just as a distinction from my experience as a young football player, being a bit more highly touted out of the Hamilton region in your recruiting process. I mean, actually getting teams to bring you on visits for one. I wouldn't have that privilege. you've seen from that standpoint a little bit more of what those, the classic champagne and campaign wine and dine process looks like that I didn't. Now that you coach at the high school level and you get to have those conversations, if only by proxy of that and compare it to your own experiences growing up as a kid and going to camps and I don't know, like sending out DVDs of highlights to coaches, how do you feel from what you see now and talk with some of your players and you sports coaches who are out there on the recruiting path from your own experience as someone who again was a much more recruited talent than I and from such a hotbed like Hamilton? How have you felt like those have changed in the 15 years now? Is it longer? Let's not
It's
talk numbers on that standpoint.
God, I'm a fossil. Uh, but yeah, no, it was a hell of an experience and something that I really look back on fondly, having the opportunity and the awesome ability to get recruited, whatever. It feels like it's much more put together, the whole recruiting process, where there's unofficial visits and there's official visits and there's all of this other like language and terminology that goes around in it. You can do this on an official visit, you can't do this on an unofficial, whatever the case. But when I was getting recruited, I had, like I said, I traveled a whole bunch. I went out to St. Mary's, which was awesome and everything. But I'll never forget, I had somebody from Simon Fraser actually fly in. I think they were doing like a whole bunch of recruiting stuff. They didn't just fly in for me or anything, but they flew in. They took me out to lunch. We were just kind of talking shop, talking football, whatever. And he goes, "Yeah, there's a lot of things going on, and we're in the NCAA right now, so I think I could get fined for just buying you this lunch. I could get a lot of shit for that." And I go, I'm looking at him as like a 17-year-old kid, going, "Am I gonna get in trouble here? Like, what's happening?" But I think there's a whole lot. Like I said, there's more structure there, which is a lot better. I think that kids going into this, for the most part, and you and I have pretty solid, great relationships with all of the, especially OUA schools across Ontario here. For the most part, everybody that I've spoken to, and even the kids that I have at my high school who have gotten a chance to get recruited, the coaches are pretty well upfront with them. Hey, this is who we have in front of you. This is what our position group at this level kind of looks like. This is the realistic timeline for you at your current level with your size and height and everything else. There are, I guess, a number, and you can especially tell when there's a few other coaches at a practice or a game or something, and they're grumbling about, well, this kid was told something and he shouldn't have been here or whatever the case may be. So I'm sure it's still kind of out there, but for the most part, coaches who are coming out, hey, we like what we see. There's an opportunity for you here, but you're an offensive lineman. It's going to take you 3 years until you're ready to go. We've got a number of guys in front of you. Or, hey, we really need another running back. You could have some opportunities in your first year or second year, aka Tayshaun Jackson, to really be a playmaker and to really showcase your stuff. So, I think the schools are doing a lot better. I think the coaches are doing a whole lot better. Back in the day when you and I were playing, there was the whole notion of Coach Marshall at Western saying, "I want 200 kids at training camp because I don't want to play against them at another school. I'd rather cut a kid than have to worry about game playing against him." And I don't think he did anything incorrectly there. Like, he was, "Hey, we're Western football. You want to be a part of a great program. Why don't you come on down?" But to me, that's not happening as much, where kids are now really spreading out. They're getting an opportunity to kind of play and really have that better conversations, rather than just, "Yeah, you should come to my school because we want you here." "Oh, you want to play right away? We want you to play right away. Yeah, that'd be great." And then you get on site and it's like, "Well, there's 6 guys ahead of you here, and 4 out of the 6 are in second year, so you're probably not going to play as much." I don't see that as much. I'm sure there are still some horror stories that are out there, but for the most part, I think it's gotten a whole lot better, and the recruiting process is getting better and better, especially with the outstanding quality of coaches across the OUA that you and I have talked about a few times.
And I think this is one of those spaces where social media has a positive impact because I think if some of
Absolutely.
those aspects of recruiting were still going on, it's a quick ticket to someone just getting called out versus just like I think all the stories that you and I can share on this are all kind of like, oh well, a buddy who signed here and then he said how
Friend of
God
mine.
it's all sort of word of mouth and it's somewhat apocryphal and it's all the the story of like being in that recruiting meeting and them showing you the tape of, oh, this guy's ahead, is on his second year, but he's crap and all this. And you're just like, well, are you just going to do that to me in the future? Or,
Mhm.
and stories too of a guy who comes in and, there's a certain coordinator there and you fit under that system. And all of a sudden, they promise you the sun and the moon. And all of a sudden there's a new guy in there. And all of a sudden they want something different out of that position that you got recruited by the former guy to go in and do. Or when again they give, I've certainly sometimes I've seen it a few times in my own locker rooms that I've been a part of where a guy is brought in as the prodigal son, the savior, and you're kind of looking at like, you haven't even gone through a day of training camp. Like, why are we giving this guy like more swag than a fifth-year veteran has, who's torn ligaments in his shoulder and this, that, and the third, right? So I think partly that social media aspect has to be applauded in some regards, because I think there's just more accountability from that standpoint. And as you said, just better coaching overall, that we can move away a little bit from that. But it's so darn competitive that, again, you can understand where with the money conversation is an interesting thing that we brought up in conversation that we'll perhaps save for another time, with things going on and just Canadian universities in general with
Yeah.
international students and everything like that and funding and whatnot. But we'll save that perhaps for a whole other podcast. But nonetheless, I mean, hey, even Arnaud mentioned it in talking about some of the recruiting opportunities and scouting opportunities he had at other schools of, well, coming out of Quebec that it's Montreal and Laval, but you're probably gonna have to sit for a little bit, or you can go to another school and play right away. Well, if I know the big pitch in our generation was, do you want to go somewhere and paint a house, or do you want to go somewhere and build a house? And whichever personality you attract to that method, it's whatever your culture you're trying to sell fundamentally, from that standpoint. Tom, anything else you want on this topic? Obviously, we covered the clinics we were at, the Steel City Bowl. Anything else on the go we want to cover before we wrap it up?
Yeah, just real quickly, we mentioned it a couple of times. Football Ontario starting up here. You've got ID camps that are happening in the new year. You and I are planning at being at one or two of them. I don't think we're going to make the drive up to Sudbury, but I'm eyeing at January 11th at the University of Waterloo for myself. And you and I are both talking about January 25th at York University. That might be a great one as well. I think we're going to start doing a little bit more with Football Ontario in the summertime here, so folks can certainly look forward to that in the new year. But if you've got a kid, if you're listening to us and you're in a high school level, go out for those camps. Worst case scenario, you go out for an ID camp and you get cut, but you still expose yourself to a whole bunch of youth sports coaches who are top to bottom outstanding. Head coach Tommy Kanichis is friend of the program, a good buddy of mine, an outstanding human being. And if I had the opportunity to play for that guy, I would, even though he and I played against each other way back in the day. But you get my meaning. I would highly recommend, if you have the opportunity, to go out there, try it out. I think you'll really get a lot of outstanding experiences out of this as well. So just wanted to give a quick shout out to Football Ontario and let everybody know in some way, shape, or form, we're still kind of working that out. But you'll see Zach and I at Football Ontario and be a little bit more intertwined with those guys.
We absolutely will. And we mentioned the accessibility aspect already, and it goes without saying that it's Football Ontario's, amongst all the missions that they have, one at the forefront is to make, I mean, it's the slogan that they've been using, football for all.
Mhm.
And a big part of that is an accessibility piece, because we know that this game can come with a financial cost to it. And, again, it's about finding every possible player and giving them that opportunity.
Yeah, and there is a line here, a couple lines here that JT has been a part of. And as the director of culture and sport at Football Ontario, this is the thing that he is the most proud of. And I want to read this word for word that's in his official Team Ontario men's football document. Over the last 3 years, 240 young men have represented our province and worn the Team Ontario game jersey. During this time, no family that has communicated and expressed a financial need has been denied the Team Ontario experience. Not one family. Football for all is more than just words to us. It's an ongoing mission that we are committed to. that little 4 or 5 sentences right there is why you and I love JT Suey, Aaron Giesler, and everybody at Football Ontario so damn much.
And that hasn't always been the case, because there used to be a time back
Mm-hmm.
in our day where there was a little bit of, oh, he's a Team O guy. All right, cool. So he was able to pay to go to the clinic. And that's like all you necessarily discern from it and things of that nature. So that's outstanding. All the love and respect to JT, Aaron, and their team there with Football Ontario and all the great things that they're doing there. Tom, that was an outstanding job by you. Perhaps one of the shorter pods we ever do, but dipping our toes into the waters of high school football and starting to branch out into all the avenues that make football here in Canada, and especially here in Ontario, so special. We will be back with you next week as we do a little bit of holiday, New Year kind of fun content for you, doing a little retrospective. And then in short order, we will start to have the exit meeting interviews coming your way. Just because it ain't football season doesn't mean we're going anywhere. So we'll be here talking to you right here at the 55.